Last week, one of the biggest announcements in the games industry occurred. It's not related to that. No, that's just for background. At this point, I don't really care what they're doing. They've burned so many bridges. No, I'm talking about the actual thing that is the most important thing to happen in gaming last week. It is a thing of incredible importance. It is a landmark moment. It will usher in a new age. It is at the same level as THQ putting its games on the humble monthly subscription thing, whatever it's called now. Somebody of the big, well, relatively big publishers had to do it first. Somebody had to take the plunge. Somebody had to test the waters. Somebody had to see if people would go for it. And Paradox Interactive did it. They made DLC a subscription service. Not for all their games, but just for one single game. And this is monumental. This is something that will have ramifications that will go on for decades. I was honestly expecting Electronic Arts to be the first ones to do this, because they have The Sims, which exists solely to squeeze money out of DLC. And they already have a subscription service which does not include the DLC. They're still expecting people to pay money for the DLC. Same goes with Microsoft's thing with their subscription stuff, the Xbox Games Pass and Windows Games for Live thing. You get the games, the base games, but not the DLC. You have to pay for that separately. And now Paradox is testing that separate thing. I'm going to go a bit into detail about the reasons for why they are doing this now, because there is more than one. But first, I have to preface this by telling you about my relationship with the company. Paradox was the first company to throw me a bone. Their old marketing director, okay, she's not old, Susanna Meza, you probably know her if you've dealt with the company in the past. She was the first person in the video games industry to give me, directly to me, some rando on the interwebs, a review copy of a game. Usually how it worked was that the place I was working at would contact the publisher, usually Ubisoft, because they were practically next door to each other, and they'd get a review copy of a game from Ubisoft. And maybe that one got to me sometime. I only have the review copy of Tom Clancy's Endgame. That's all I ever got from Arena TV. I had to make do for all the other ones, because my first boss was a bastard. But anyway, back to the matter at hand. Not only did she give me a review key for, I think it was Krakow 1948. It was a World War II sort of tank, real-time strategy tactics thing. It was a very complicated game, as she put it. It's not a beer and pretzels game. Alongside that game came also the press account for the distribution service called Gamersgate, which at one point Paradox had owned, and then it got split off. This was in the olden times, you know, when Steam was kind of just getting going outside of Valve's own games. And through that account, I just got a bunch of games that I could review and do, you know, shows about and reviews and stuff. And I owe Paradox basically my career in this field. Now, you wouldn't call it a career if you look at my pension plan, but still, I have a soft spot for Paradox because of that. Also, at one point, I I briefly discussed the idea of translating the Showdown Effect into Romanian. I wanted to do something like a sort of pilot for, let's see if we translate this game into Romanian, if people will buy it, because at that point people in Romania didn't really buy games. They do now, because, well, every game's $5 nowadays after a couple of months. And there's the Humble store that gives you a bunch of games for $12, and then there's subscription services, which, well, Humble Bundle is the same kind of thing now. But anyway, I was talking this over with Shams Georgiani. He's now a corporate paladin. He used to be head of the Unicorn division, but he said that at that point they were thinking about going into a different direction with the localization of having intentionally goofily bad translations, because the game was an homage to badly translated, badly localized 80s and 70s, or mostly 80s action movies, which we used to get on VHS. If you're in the United States, you're probably thinking of martial arts movies. Yeah, all our movies, all the ones that we saw in Europe, were like those martial arts movies for you. Had badly lip sync, well, not even lip sync. We had, in my country, had a lady talking over the dialogue of the movie, translating it on the fly. and she was good at it. Like, she was like amazing. There is actually a documentary about her on HBO. If you go to HBO Go or HBO Max, try to find Chuck Norris versus communism. It is her story about how she would just lock herself in a room and translate a bajillion movies. So go watch that. But anyway, we didn't end up translating the Showdown Effect into Romanian, and they did not go with the goofy translation via, badly Google translated things with the Showdown Effect either. It was just a standard thing. But that wasn't like the end of me trying to work with Paradox. I tried at one point to submit my resume for their, I think it was video editor or something for trailers. I had at that point been using an Athlon 64 to do videos, so we didn't have anything to show, like something that would make them go, wow, yeah, this guy from Romania, that he may actually do something like nice for us in the future. And I'm fine with that, because if they had hired me, they wouldn't have gotten Jazz Boatman, which, let's face it, Jazz Boatman was amazing. But anyway, that's my relationship with the company. I'm not as close to them as I was, because since I kind of almost died in 2015, I kind of disconnected myself from everything else and focused on not dying, and then this channel and the other things. But anyway, that's so you understand where I'm coming from with what I have to say about Paradox doing this. So, the reason that they have stated for implementing this subscription is that Crusader Kings 2 is an intimidating game. The base game is free. And, Paradox also sponsored a bunch of giveaways I did on the old channel. Basically, everybody in Romania got Crusader Kings 2 for free from me, Paradox through me, but the game has been free for a while now. And even so, it is intimidating, because once you look at the Steam page, you kind of see that there's 200 to 300 euros worth of DLC there. That is more money than you'll probably spend on most of your games put together in a year. If you spend more, then my god, you are rich. That's a month's wage for me. Well, not exactly a month's. Actually, looking at the current conversion of the euro, it's close. It is really close. So back to what I was saying. If somebody wants to get into the game now, they will have to pay a whole lot of money to do so. This game was released 10 years ago. Over that decade, you would have had time to, get money and maybe think about getting this new DLC, seeing how it runs, how it changes the game, and you would have a gradually increased complexity experience that gave you more features, more stuff to do, and in general, you would have smooth experience if you were really committed to it. And I mean really committed to it. Now, to its credit, Paradox did give some of the DLC away, and then had some bundles with like Humble Bundle, where they gave the ones with the Viking thing. What was it? Chariots of the Gods? No, the Old Gods. Yeah, the Old Gods. There were ways to get some of the DLC at lower prices, but unless you actually got that DLC at that time, you would be faced with the unfortunate situation of paying, even on sale, about 100 euros to get it all. That's not a great thing. That is a terrible thing. So hence, subscription. For 5 euros or $5 a month, you get all the DLC for this game and this game alone. Now, in concept, at first glance, this doesn't sound so bad. Instead of spending $300, you pay maybe like $10-15. You pay it for 3 months, get tired of it, and Bob's your uncle. You want to do that again? Okay, 5 months from now, get another month subscription, and then just play it, and you're clear. But, and this is a big, gigantic but. I mean, it is badonkadonk levels of but. This is for one single player game. You're paying a subscription for one single player game's DLC. As a precedent, this is dangerous, because this, if it is successful, will have consequences that will not necessarily be all positive. Now, even if Paradox's intentions were good with this thing, I foresee some negative effects in the future. Now, this isn't a slippery slope argument. This is simply the way that the industry works. Remember Horse Armor, which was released as kind of a joke and then everybody laughed at it? Well, not everybody, was against it, and horse armor became an actual thing. You can buy horse armor, aesthetic DLC for most games. Had Paradox wanted to truly make the game less daunting in terms of finance for people just coming in, they could have slashed the price of the DLC, or better yet, bundle up some of the earlier DLC into the base game and leave the latest ones, the newest ones, at their normal price to be purchased by people who want to expand the game. This kind of approach kind of used to be the norm back in the day. You used to get the Game of the Year, the gold version, the all the bells and whistles edition. Neverwinter Nights did this with its diamond edition, and then platinum, then diamond, where it used to include all the expansions, all the DLC, all the modules. Well, not all the modules. Some of them got stuck in limbo until they were resurrected on GOG. Some of them, by the way, are better than the base game. I think I just ruined Neverwinter Nights for myself by finishing the base game. That campaign was just bad, especially if you played it as a paladin and couldn't tell that the paladins, the priests of Helm that were in the city were, not blessing you, they were villains. You kind of think that a detect evil, ability was something that a paladin could use on some people, but no, it was a Bioware story that was made in the crappy style that they've been known for in their later years. Anyway, moving back to the subject that we are talking about today. That would have been an option had Paradox Interactive been the company that released Crusader Kings 2 10 years ago, but it's not that company anymore. A while ago, Paradox became a publicly traded company, which was something they did so they could expand more, which they've done a lot of. They've expanded considerably. They've grown immensely. They own multiple companies. They're the ones that are now publishing or kind of making Bloodlines 2, which is fine. Well, Shams has complete confidence that the team will do right by it. He has confidence in the team, but we haven't really heard much about it in months, apart from the writers leaving. So hopefully it will not be a worse launch than Cyberpunk 2077. And because it has expanded as a company, because it has shareholders, it cannot pass up the opportunity to make more money. And getting $5 a month from people wanting to try the Crusader Kings 2 DLC is a heck of a lot of a better situation than getting no money from people who cannot afford the Crusader Kings 2 DLC or were just paralyzed at where to begin with the DLC. This is also a reason why they implemented the subscription as an extra revenue channel, one that, if successful, I have no doubt will be expanded to other games. The question is, how exactly will they expand it? Because if they make a DLC pass for each individual game, sort of like we have season passes. Oh, by the way, remember when DLC passes gave you the whole DLC of the game and not just part of it? When it was understood that, oh, I pay this, I get all the DLC, cool. And then Borderlands 2 came out and they included a second season pass. And then The Crew came out, which did not include in its season pass the actual expansion that was supposed to be there. It just included some cars that were supposed to be in the base game, but gouge people for money because we're Ubisoft, and also have the same physics as big rigs over the road racing where you can go at 700 kilometers an hour backwards. And okay, no more The Crew. If I keep talking about The Crew, we'll never get to the point of the show. If they make a DLC pass for each individual game, then we are kind of in for a sort of Hell World scenario of every company doing that. You're gonna have a DLC pass for Medal of Honor, a DLC pass for The Sims, a DLC pass for... I'm kind of shocked that they haven't DLC passed Need for Speed Into the Ground yet. I don't know exactly what Electronic Arts is missing, because they could have just pumped DLC into the game until the end of time. Now sure, they would have had to first make a base game that was good, which they haven't in years, so maybe that's what was stopping them. But having different passes for different games would be a profitable venture, don't get me wrong. Sure, they could make a lot of money from this, but it would kind of suck for the player. Even the positive alternative of having a DLC pass for every game and then having a game pass for the base version of the game still kind of sucks. You're paying at that point 2 subscriptions for everything. Well, in Paradox's case, I'm not sure if they have a subscription type service for their own games, but their games are part of subscription services on stuff like the Microsoft Xbox Game Store Windows Live Games Pass Games thing, on which I played Crusader Kings 3, and I kind of wanted to make a video about it at the time, but while playing it, my RX 480 died, the video card that was previously in use in this computer yonder, so that didn't really pan out. Also, they increased the price of the subscription since then, so I'm not about to sign up again, especially now since Forza Horizon 4 is coming out on Steam and I don't have to use Microsoft's infrastructure at all, which is a big plus for me. It's a gigantic positive gain of not having to use the Microsoft thing, which routinely failed. But if this DLC pass does have success, then it will be expanded upon for sure. That is one of the goals with it, to see if it works, to see if people will go for it. And I think they will, because Crusader Kings 2, even though it received a lot of updates in the base version as well, which were funded by people buying the expansions, is still kind of a bit bare bones unless you get those expansions. And that brings even more questions of how will this shape games moving forward? Will the base game become even more diluted? Paradox was already working on the idea of making a solid, lightweight core for their games, one that is not 60 euros. Their games haven't been 60 euros since, I'm not sure if they've ever been 60 euros. They've always had cheap games or cheaper games on release date than everybody else, because on top of that, they would build with DLC. And if this thing works, what will that mean for the initial release, when they will have actual data proving that a subscription model for the development of future DLC of a single player game is sustainable? Again, that is, if it is successful. How will that shape games? How will that shape Paradox in the future? Most importantly, how will that shape other companies? Because Paradox may have made some duds in the past. Empire was terrible, and I was at the live stream when they tried as hard as they could to explain why it wasn't terrible. They didn't really do a good job of explaining why. But for the most part, they still are a company that tries in some ways to do good by gamers, to actually make games that are valuable to us. Their whole idea is that they make games that they themselves would want to play, and then they release too much DLC for them, and in some cases implement as DLC things that should have been part of the base game, like the flashpoints in BattleTech or the city maps in BattleTech. BattleTech's DLC is kind of necessary to get more out of the game, so it doesn't become repetitive and boring, and I really hope they take into account some of the suggestions I sent them when the game was released, for the second one, because to this day, I still can't fathom to this day how the multiplayer shooter, MechWarrior Online, is a more tactics-driven game than the single-player tactics game. It even has deeper player progression in terms of, abilities and skills and stuff, and customization. Did you know that they're developing MechWarrior Online again? It just got its first patch in 3 years, and it's getting more of them. If you see a Thunder God Steiner in-game, that's me. Crusader Kings 2 was without a doubt the perfect place to test out this concept, because it's finished development. It finished it a while ago. It has an incredible amount of DLC, and it was, when it was released, the company's biggest success. It is a game that has a following. It is a game that has reach. It is a game where this can be tested properly. I would have much preferred that they had tested this with Stellaris, because I'm not gonna buy $100 worth of DLC to play the latest DLC that adds espionage into the game. I've asked them for espionage since the game was released, so not gonna get all of the, not gonna spend so much money on all that DLC just to, get the full experience of the game up until now and then get the new DLC. It's too much of a monetary investment for a single game. Hence, the subscription, which in my case, for one single game that I would have played, would have worked for me. But if in 3-4 years every game's gonna have its own subscription for the DLC, it's not gonna be a fun world to live in. But maybe that's just me being pessimistic or a prophet. If you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see some prophecies that came true. Hell, if you look at this channel or the one in Romanian, I used to make a top 7 prophecies. Some of them came true. I have better odds than flipping a coin. I have immensely better odds than most prophets on TV or fortune tellers. You may as well call me Muad'Dib. And that's my cue to head out into the desert and be swallowed by Shai Hulud. See you folks next time with a much... Actually, no, this show is gonna be big as well. It's like 20 minutes already. I was initially gonna have a different show here today, but I wanted to make it fancy, you know, with graphics and moving elements and stuff, you know, since you're getting shows like once in a blue moon, they may as well look nice, you know, have elements that are shiny and use transition effects and DaVinci Fusion, which is DaVinci's version of After Effects, used to its fullest potential since it's built in to the editing program and not a separate thing like Adobe used to do. Man, am I glad I'm rid of Adobe. Anyway, that show is still coming. Also the other two. So that does bring up the question, should people be using our Patreon now that I'm actually making shows? Well, it's your call. I'm not going to force you. There's probably going to be a little exclusive DLC on Patreon. We actually don't do exclusive DLC to Patreon. You have the first show of a new series that's temporarily exclusive to Patreon. You get first dibs on it, but other than that, everybody gets everything. You get our shows here, you get them on Libri, you get them... Oh, by the way, Libri, it's Odyssey now. They've sort of mirrored themselves as a video-only YouTube alternative as Odyssey, which it simplifies things a bit, but I was under the impression that I knew who the CEO of the company was until at one point I actually found out who he was and looked him up on Twitter, and woof, like... You're the kind of people that you look at when they're talking to you and just smile and nod and back away out of a room. Yeah, their CEO is kind of giving me that kind of vibe. That kind of I hunt people for sport vibe. So it's probably not going to be a fun future for Libri if that guy starts talking or more people figure out he's behind it. Also, it's still kind of weird that a decentralized company has a CEO. That's something we've been burned on in the past with Steemit, because that company had a CEO, an asshole who didn't pay his employees. Hi Ned, by the way, but ended up making a bunch of money on it as well. So anywho, in regards to the future of the channel, more shows are coming, so if you want to sponsor us on Patreon, go for it. I pretty much get all the money when Raul sends it to me. He has other jobs that pay monumentally better than anything that YouTube does. Oh, by the way, we're not affiliated on YouTube with anything anymore. We used to be a screen wave maker crash thing, but since we uploaded content like never, we are not that anymore, so we don't officially earn any money from YouTube. We may see ads. I'm not sure where the money for the ads goes because there's nothing set up to actually, you know, take that $5 we make every month from YouTube and put it like into our hands or something. It would be actually quite terrible if we had success like right now when we have no means of collecting the money. So you know it's gonna happen. And it's going to happen now. That's how the universe works. It's Murphy's Law all the way down to the turtles. Speaking of turtles, since this is a really long-winded outro, I saw the first episode of The Watch, adaptation of the Discworld novels. It made me physically ill. Now the whole season is done and I think I want to be punished. I think I hate myself enough to want to go watch it just to see how awful it can get. I mean, I already saw Brave New World, which is an atrocity. I didn't have the stomach to watch the reboot / continuation because it looked like a ripoff of a different show and also crap. Maybe I deserve suffering. That's why they made that show from one of the books that I most loved. Maybe it's still 2015 and this is just my brain dying from asphyxiation. Why else would that thing have been made in the first place? The world makes more sense that way. So, see you everybody soon. You're welcome to join our Discord channel. It's dead. I barely post on it. Nobody does. We mostly just hang around there and remember the old times when we had lives. But we will try next month to set up a different live stream only channel that's going to be solely in Romanian. You know, to get back to the olden days when we used to stream in Romanian before, YouTube deleted our live stream channel before we could, make the snippets and the edits and, the concentration of the fun part. YouTube is terrible, by the way. It's continued to be terrible and will never stop being terrible. And all alternatives to it seem to be terrible in different ways, but they're still terrible. Which leads me to believe that my first two bosses were kind of correct in the idea that self-hosting is the only way to go. It's expensive. You'll always be in need of a second, third job to finance your first job, but hey, it beats the alternatives. All of them. Goodbye, everybody.